The Business of the 21st Century. Written by Robert T. Kiyosaki. Dedication. This book, The Business of the 21st Century, is dedicated to the millions of people who are at a crossroads in life, who are affected by the current economic crisis and feeling helpless as to what they can do to secure their financial future. Robert Kiyosaki wants all readers of the book to know that despite what each reader may be experiencing financially, this is the best time to take control of their financial future. As someone who had spent his life educating people on how to attain financial freedom, Robert Kiyosaki in this book, like the other books in his Rich Dad series, provides his readers with insight needed to create and sustain wealth for years to come. He believes that once people learn the truth of how money works and the business opportunities available to them in the 21st century, they will be able to begin building the kind of life they desire. Introduction. The economy is in tatters. Your job is in trouble if you still have a job. And you know what? I've been saying it for years. It took a global financial meltdown for most to hear it. But this book isn't about how or why everything has gone to hell in a handbasket. It's about why this bad news turns out to be very good news if you know what to do about it. I learned about business from two people: my father, who was a very well-educated, highly placed government employee, and my best friend's father, who was an 8th grade dropout and self-made millionaire. My real father suffered financial problems his entire life and died with little to show for all the long years of hard work. My best friend's dad became one of the richest men in Hawaii. I thought of these two men as my poor dad and my rich dad. I loved and admired my real dad very much, and vowed that I would help as many people as possible avoid suffering the kinds of indignities and failures that plagued his path. After I left home, I had all kinds of experiences. I served in the Marines as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. I went to work for Xerox, starting out as their worst salesperson and leaving 4 years later as their best. After leaving Xerox, I developed several multimillion-dollar international businesses and was able to retire at the age of 47 to pursue my passion to teach others how to build wealth and live the lives they dream of living, instead of settling for mediocrity and sullen resignation. In 1997, I wrote about my experiences in a little book. I must have touched a chord with at least a few readers. Rich Dad Poor Dad shot to the top of the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for more than 4 years, and has been described as the best-selling business book of all time. Since then, I've put out a whole series of Rich Dad books, and although each one has a slightly different focus, they all deliver the exact same message as that first book, and it's the message at the heart of this book you now hold in your hands. Take responsibility for your finances or get used to taking orders for the rest of your life. You're either a master of money or a slave to it. Your choice. I was incredibly fortunate in my life to have experiences and mentors that showed me how to build genuine wealth. As a result, I was able to retire completely from any need to work ever again. Up until that time, I was working to build my family's future. Since then, I've been working to help build yours. For the past 10 years, I have devoted my life to finding the most effective and practical ways to help people transform their lives in the 21st century by learning how to build genuine wealth. Through our Rich Dad books, my partners and I have written about many different types and forms of enterprise and investment. But during these years of intensive research, I have come across one business model in particular that I believe holds the greatest promise for the largest number of people to get control of their financial lives, their futures, and their destinies. One more thing. When I say genuine wealth, I'm not talking about money alone. Money is part of it, but it's not the whole. Building genuine wealth is as much about the builder as it is about the building. In this book, I'm going to show you why you need to build your own business, and exactly what kind of business. But this isn't just about changing the type of business you're working with, it's also about changing you. I can show you how to find what you need to grow the perfect business for you, but for your business to grow, you will have to grow as well. Welcome to the business of the 21st century. The end of introduction. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so now. God bless you. Part 1. Take control of your future. Why you need to have a business of your own. Chapter 1. The rules have changed. We live in troubled times. The last few years have brought us a steady parade of fear and panic in the headlines, boardrooms, and kitchen tables across America. Globalization, outsourcing, downsizing, foreclosures, subprime mortgages and credit default swaps, Ponzi schemes, Wall Street fiascos, recession. It's just one piece of bad news after another. During the first few months of 2009, U.S. company layoffs reached about 250,000 per month. As I write this in late 2009, unemployment is at 10.2% and still rising, and underemployment, where your job stays in place but your hours and pay are drastically cut back, is even worse. The rampant decline in gainful employment is a ravaging epidemic to which few are immune. From executives and middle managers to administration employees and blue-collar workers, from bankers to retail clerks, all are at risk. Even the healthcare industry, until recently considered a job-safe zone, is trimming away significant chunks of its workforce. In the fall of 2008, a lot of people's retirement portfolios suddenly lost half their value or more. Real estate crashed. What people thought were their solid, reliable assets turned out to be about as solid as water vapor. Job security is gone, a thing of the past. In a 2009 USA Today survey, 60% of Americans polled said they see today's economic situation as the biggest crisis in their lifetime. Of course, you already know all this. But here's what you may not know, none of this is really news. Sure, it took a major economic crisis for people to start waking up to the fact that their livelihoods were at risk. But your income didn't become at risk overnight, it was always at risk. Most of the US population has been living for years on the knife-edge precipice between solvency and ruin, relying on the next paycheck or two to meet each month's expenses, typically with only a very thin cushion of cash savings or more often, no cushion at all. That paycheck is called trading your time for money, and during a recession, it is the least reliable source of income there is. Why? Because when the number of employed people starts dropping, there is less disposable income in circulation to pay for your time. I told you so. Not to be an I told you so, but I told you so. I've been saying this for years. There is no longer such a thing as a safe and secure job. Corporate America is a 20th century dinosaur, trembling on the edge of extinction, and the only way for you to have a genuinely secure future is for you to take control of that future. Here's what I wrote in 2001, in a book titled The Business School for People Who Like Helping People. In my opinion, the United States and many Western nations have a financial disaster coming, caused by our educational system's failure to adequately provide a realistic financial education program for students. That same year, in an interview for Nightingale Conant, I said, "If you think mutual funds are going to be there for you, if you want to bet your life on the ups and downs of the stock market, that's your retirement you're betting on. What happens if the stock market goes up and then comes crashing down again when you're 85 years old? You have no control." I'm not saying mutual funds are bad. I'm just saying they're not safe and they're not smart, and I wouldn't bet my financial future on them. Never before in the history of the world have so many people bet their retirement on the stock market. That is insane. Do you think Social Security is going to be there to take care of you? Then you also believe in the Easter Bunny. And in an interview I did in March 2005, I said this: "The number one strength of a paper asset is its liquidity, and that is also its number one weakness. We all know there's going to be another market crash and we're going to be wiped out again. Why would you do that? So what just happened? There was another market crash and many people got wiped out again. Why? Because our habits and mindset caught up with us. In 1971, the American economy went off the gold standard. This happened without the approval of Congress, by the way, but the important thing is that it happened. Why is that significant? Because it cleared the way for us to start printing more and more money, as much as we liked, without it being tied to any actual, hard, real value. This shift away from reality opened the gates for the biggest economic boom in history. Over the next 3.5 decades, the American middle class exploded. As the dollar devalued and the on-the-books value of real estate and other assets inflated, ordinary people became millionaires. Suddenly credit was available to anyone, anytime, anywhere, and credit cards began popping up like mushrooms after a spring rain. To pay off those credit cards, Americans started using their homes as ATMs, refinancing and borrowing and refinancing. After all, real estate always keeps going up in value, right? Wrong. By 2007 we had pumped as much hot air into this financial balloon as it could take, and the fantasy came crashing down to earth again. And it wasn't just Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns that collapsed. Millions lost their 401(k)s, their pensions, and their jobs. In the 1950s, when General Motors was the most powerful corporation in America, the press picked up a statement by GM's president and turned it into a slogan that carried for decades: "As GM goes, so goes the nation." Well, folks, that may not be all good news, because where GM went in 2009 was into bankruptcy, and by that same summer, the state of California was paying its bills with EIS instead of cash. Right now, the percentage of Americans who own their homes is dropping. Mortgage foreclosures are at an all-time high. The number of middle-class families is dropping. Savings accounts are smaller, if they exist at all, and family debt is greater. The number of people living officially below the poverty line is rising rapidly. The number of people who are working beyond the age of 65 is increasing. The number of new bankruptcies is going through the roof. And many Americans do not have enough to retire, not even close. Has all this bad news got your attention? Sure it has, and you're not alone. Americans everywhere have finally stopped rolling over and hitting the snooze button. Great. Now you're awake to what's going on, and it isn't pretty. So let's take a deeper look and see what it really means and what there is you can do about it. It's a new century. When I was a kid, my parents taught me the same formula for success that you probably learned: go to school, study hard, and get good grades so you can get a secure, high-paying job with benefits, and your job will take care of you. But that's industrial age thinking, and we're not in the industrial age anymore. Your job is not going to take care of you. The government will not take care of you. Nobody's going to take care of you. It's a new century, and the rules have changed. My parents believed in job security, company pensions, Social Security, and Medicare. These are all worn out, obsolete ideas left over from an age gone by. Today job security is a joke, and the very idea of lifetime employment with a single company, an ideal so proudly championed by IBM in its heyday, is as anachronistic as a manual typewriter. Many thought their 401(k) retirement plans were safe. Hey, they were backed by blue-chip stocks and mutual funds. What could go wrong? As it turned out, everything could go wrong. The reason these once sacred cows no longer give any milk is that they are all obsolete. Pensions, job security, retirement security, it's all industrial age thinking. We're in the information age now, and we need to use information age thinking. Fortunately, people are starting to listen and learn. It's a shame that it takes suffering and hardship to bring the lesson home, but at least the lessons are hitting home. Every time we experience a major crisis, the dot-com bust, the economic aftermath of 9/11, the financial panic of 08, and recession of 09, more people realize that the old safety nets just won't hold up anymore. The corporate myth is over. If you've spent years climbing the corporate ladder, have you ever stopped to notice the view? What view, you ask? The rear end of the person in front of you. That's what you get to look forward to. If that's the way you want to view the rest of your life, then this book probably isn't for you. But if you are sick and tired of looking at someone else's behind, then read on. Don't be fooled again. As I write this, unemployment is still on the rise. By the time you read these words, who knows? The situation may have changed. Don't be fooled. When employment and real estate values turn around and credit loosens up again, as they inevitably will, don't be lulled into that same old sense of false security that got you and the rest of the world into this mess in the first place. In the summer of 2008, gas prices were soaring over $4 a gallon. SUV sales sank like a stone, and suddenly everyone was on the small car and hybrid bandwagon. But look what happened next. By 2009, gas prices had fallen back down below $2, and so help me, people started buying SUVs again. What? Do we really think fuel prices are going to stay nice and low? That gas prices are down for good now, and therefore gas guzzlers make perfect sense to buy. Can we really be that short-sighted? I'm trying to be nice here. The word I was going to use was stupid. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. We aren't just fooled once, we let ourselves be fooled over and over again. We all grew up hearing the fable of the ant and the grasshopper, but the overwhelming majority of us keep living with the foresight of a grasshopper anyway. Don't be distracted by the headlines. There is always some idiotic buzz going on that tries to pull your attention away from the serious business of building your life. It's just noise. Whether it's terrorism, recession, or the latest election cycle scandals, it's got nothing to do with what you need to be doing today to build your future. During the Great Depression, there were people who made fortunes. And during the greatest boom times, like the real estate surge of the 80s, there were millions and millions of people who neglected to take charge of their future, who ignored everything I'm going to share with you in this book and ended up struggling or broke. Most of them, in fact, are still struggling or broke today. The economy is not the issue. The issue is you. Are you angry at the corruption in the corporate world? At Wall Street and the big banks that let this happen? At the government for not doing enough, or for doing too much, or for doing too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right things? Are you angry at yourself for not taking control sooner? Life is tough. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Moaning and groaning won't secure your future. Neither will blaming Wall Street, the big bankers, corporate America, or the government. If you want a solid future, you need to create it. You can take charge of your future only when you take control of your income source. You need your own business. The end of Chapter 1. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so now. God bless you. Chapter 2. The Silver Lining. On July 13, 2009, Time magazine ran a piece on page 2 they called 10 Questions for Robert Kiyosaki. One of the questions asked of me was this: are there opportunities to create new companies in this turbulent economy? Are you kidding? Was my first thought. Here is how I answered. This is the best time. When times are bad is when the real entrepreneurs emerge. Entrepreneurs don't really care if the market's up or down. They're creating better products and better processes. So when somebody says, "Oh, there's less opportunity now," it's because they're losers. You've heard an awful lot of bad news about the economy. Ready for the good news? Actually, the bad news is the good news. I'll tell you the same thing I told Time magazine: a recession is the best time to start your own business. When the economy slows down, entrepreneurialism heats up like a stoked-up wood stove on a cold winter night. Q. What do the Microsoft and Disney empires have in common, besides the fact that they are both hugely successful billion-dollar businesses that have become household names? A. They were both launched during a recession. In fact, more than half the corporations that make up the Dow Jones Industrial Average got their starts during a recession. Why? Simple: in times of economic uncertainty, people get creative. They break out of their comfort zones and take initiative to help make ends meet. It's a matter of good, old-fashioned American entrepreneurialism at its best. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. For one thing, the market for new opportunities is ripe during tough economic times. 5 years ago, when housing values were soaring and credit was available everywhere, nobody was hungry. People's bellies were full, they felt safe, and few were looking for any alternative means of income. Employees weren't worried about the financial stability of their employers or whether a pink slip might be in their future. But now that layoffs are rampant and everyone is worried about what the future holds, millions of people are soberly re-evaluating their finances and realizing that if they want to have a secure future they can count on, they're going to have to come up with a plan B. People today are hungrier than ever to earn extra money, and because of that, they are more receptive and more inclined to open their minds to new avenues. In fact, this was true even before the recent economic meltdown. Ever since the 80s, and especially since the turn of the century, the drive to control our own economic futures has been building. Here's what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said in a 2007 report titled Work, Entrepreneurship, and Opportunity in 21st Century America. Millions of Americans are embracing entrepreneurship by running their own small businesses. Now, I'm no economist, but I know someone who is: Paul Zane Pilzer. Paul is a whiz kid, was Citibank's youngest ever vice president, and left the banking world to make millions going into business for himself. He's had a few New York Times bestsellers, predicted the savings and loan crisis before it happened, and served as an economic advisor in 2 presidential administrations. He's someone worth listening to. Paul talks about a 180-degree shift in cultural values around the nature of career paths, with the conventional corporate employee career structure giving way to the entrepreneurial path. The traditional wisdom in the second half of the 20th century, says Paul, was to go to school, get a good education, and go to work for a large company. The idea of going into business for yourself was most often regarded as risky. Admirable, perhaps, but risky, and maybe a little crazy. Today it's completely the other way around. Paul's right. That U.S. Chamber of Commerce report I mentioned also refers to a Gallup poll finding that 61% of Americans say they would prefer to be their own boss. Another poll, this one by the Fresno research firm Decipher, found that 72% of all adult Americans would rather work for themselves than for a job, and 67% think about quitting their jobs regularly or constantly. 72% of all adult Americans would rather work for themselves than for a job, and 67% think about quitting their jobs regularly or constantly. And it's not just about making a living, it's also about the quality of how we're living. People are waking up to the fact that they want more control over their lives. They want to be more connected to their families, be in charge of their own time, work from their homes, and determine their own destinies. In that Decipher study, 84% of respondents said they would be more passionate about their work if they owned their own business. The number one reason they gave for wanting to work for themselves? To be more passionate about my work life. What's happening is that the 20th century myth of job security, with its promise that the path to a long, happy, fulfilling life is to find a job working for someone else, is crumbling before our eyes. The employment mythology. Most of us are so brainwashed by our circumstances that we think of employment as normal. But far from being historically normal, the whole concept of being an employee is actually a fairly recent phenomenon. During the agrarian age, most people were entrepreneurs. Yes, they were farmers who worked the king's lands, but they were not the king's employees. They didn't receive a paycheck from the king. In fact, it was the other way around. The farmer paid the king a tax for the right to use his land. These farmers actually made their living as small business entrepreneurs. They were butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers who passed on their trade through the family lineage in what have come down to us as common last names: Smith, for the village blacksmith; Baker, for bakery owners; farmer, because their family's business was farming; tailor, derived from the tailor's profession; and cooper, the old term for the barrel maker's trade. It was not until the industrial age that a new demand began growing, the demand for employees. In response, the government took over the task of mass education, adopting the Prussian system, which is what most Western school systems in the world are still modeled after today. Have you ever wondered where the idea of retirement at age 65 came from? I'll tell you where: Otto von Bismarck, the President of Prussia, in 1889. Actually, Bismarck's plan kicked in at age 70, not 65, but it hardly matters. Promising their old folks a guaranteed pension after age 65 was not much of an economic risk for Bismarck's government. At the time, the life expectancy of the average Prussian was about 45. Today, so many are living well into their 80s and 90s that the same promise might well bankrupt the federal government within the next generation. When you research the philosophy behind Prussian education, you will find that the purpose was to produce soldiers and employees, people who would follow orders and do as they were told. The Prussian system is for mass-producing employees. In America in the 60s and 70s, companies like IBM made employment for life the gold standard of job security. But employment at IBM hit its peak in 1985, and the whole concept of the solid, reliable corporate career has been in decline ever since. As GM goes, so goes the nation. Here we are, half a century later, and things aren't going so well for GM. Does that mean America is doomed? No, but here's what is doomed: the myth of corporate security and the 40-year plan. Entrepreneurial fever. I'm not saying employment is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's only one way of generating income, and one that is extremely limited. What's happening right now is that people are waking up to this fact. These people, including you, are realizing that the only way they're going to have what they really want in life is by setting foot on the path of the entrepreneur. And by the way, I'm not the only one who sees this. You may or may not have heard of Muhammad Yunus, author of Banker to the Poor, but the Nobel Committee in Oslo, Norway, has heard of him. They gave him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for his concept of microcredit for third world entrepreneurs. All people are entrepreneurs, says Yunus, but many don't have the opportunity to find that out. He said that before the economy started tanking in 07 and 08, and in the wake of all the financial bad news, more and more people are actively seeking the opportunity to do exactly what Mr. Yunus is talking about. Entrepreneurial fever has been kicking into high gear, because when the economy slows down, entrepreneurial activity heats up. In fact, entrepreneurs flourish in down times. In times of uncertainty, we look for other ways to generate income. When we know we can't rely on employers, we begin to look at ourselves. We start thinking maybe it's time to break out of our comfort zones and get creative to help make ends meet. A Federal Reserve survey shows that the average household net worth for entrepreneurs is 5 times that of conventional employees. That means entrepreneurs are 5 times more likely to come out of this downturn unscathed and even stronger than before, because they've created their own strong economy. A recent survey found that most U.S. voters view entrepreneurship as the key to solving the current economic crisis. History has repeatedly demonstrated that new companies and entrepreneurship are the way to bolster a flagging economy, said the survey's executive director. No kidding. Entrepreneurial fever has been kicking into high gear, because when the economy slows down, entrepreneurial activity heats up. In fact, entrepreneurs flourish in down times. Maybe those most US voters who say they believe that will actually get off their duffs and do something about it. It's possible, though I'm not holding my breath. But right now, the flagging economy that I'm most interested in seeing bolstered by entrepreneurship is yours. These may be economically hard times for the majority, but for some entrepreneurs, the ones who are open-minded enough to understand what I'm going to explain in the next few chapters, these are times pregnant with economic potential. Not only is now the time to have your own business, but in fact, there has never been a better time than right now, today. As I said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And if that's true, which it is, then that leaves just two questions. First, are you willing to be tough? And if your answer is yes, then question number 2 is, get going doing what? I can't answer that first question for you, but I know exactly how to answer the second one. Answering that question is what this book is all about. The end of chapter 2. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so now. God bless you.